Along the edge of North Carolina, thin strips of land rise from the Atlantic like fragile guardians between ocean and mainland. By day, they shimmer with sunlight, dunes rolling gently, waves whispering against the shore. By night, they change. The wind carries voices that do not belong to the living. Footprints appear in the sand and end abruptly at the waterline. Lights flicker where no homes stand. Ships have shattered against these shores for centuries. Families vanished during storms. Entire villages were swallowed by sand and sea. The ocean never forgets. And the islands remember every soul claimed by the tide. Tonight, we journey along the haunted barrier islands of North Carolina, places where beauty and terror exist side by side, and where the past still walks beneath the moon. Hello, my dear friend. I hope you are safe and comfortable, because what we are about to explore lies far beyond the reach of city lights and busy roads. North Carolina's barrier islands stretch for hundreds of miles. They protect the mainland from storms, but they also absorb the full fury of the sea. For centuries, these islands have witnessed shipwrecks, pirate battles, hurricanes, and quiet tragedies that were never written down. Sailors drowned within sight of land. Settlers vanished during storms. Communities were erased overnight. Locals speak of ghost ships drifting just offshore. Visitors report hearing bells, footsteps, and crying carried by the wind. Some feel an overwhelming sadness the moment they step onto certain beaches. Before we walk any farther, let me ask you something. If you were standing alone on a barrier island at night and saw figures moving along the shoreline where no one should be, would you investigate, or would you leave before the tide came in? Take a slow breath. And let us step onto the haunted barrier islands of North Carolina. Ocracoke Island rises gently from the Atlantic, a narrow stretch of sand and marsh shaped by wind and tide. By day, it is undeniably beautiful. Sunlight glints off calm water in the harbor. Sea grass bends in steady breezes. The island feels relaxed and welcoming, a place where time slows and the horizon seems endless. Yet beneath that beauty, there is an unease that many visitors sense without being told. Ocracoke carries a weight that does not announce itself loudly. It lingers quietly, like a memory carried on salt air. As daylight fades, the island begins to change. Colors soften, and the sound of waves grows more pronounced. The docks empty. The sky darkens, and the horizon becomes a thin line separating sea from night. It is after sunset that the most unsettling experiences are reported. Along the docks, visitors sometimes hear footsteps where no one should be walking. The sound is clear and deliberate, wood responding to weight step by step. The rhythm is unhurried, moving steadily along the planks before stopping without warning. When people look up, the dock is empty, stretching into darkness with no sign of movement. The footsteps do not rush. They do not stumble. They sound purposeful, as if someone knows exactly where they are going. The silence that follows feels heavier than the sound itself, pressing in and making the empty space feel suddenly occupied. Along the shoreline, another sight unsettles those who stay out late. Lantern lights appear moving slowly near the water's edge. The glow is warm and steady, drifting along the shore as though carried by someone walking just beyond the surf. There are no boats anchored nearby. No people moving along the beach. Yet the light continues, then fades into darkness. These lanterns do not flicker like reflections. They do not behave like distant vehicles or passing aircraft. They move with intention, pausing briefly before continuing on their path, as though scanning the shoreline for something lost. Those who witness the lights often stand in silence, unsure whether to follow or remain still. When they move closer, the glow dims and disappears, leaving only the sound of waves breaking gently on the sand. Ocracoke's history offers a somber context for these experiences. The waters surrounding the island have claimed countless ships over centuries. Shifting shoals, sudden storms, and treacherous currents turned this stretch of ocean into a graveyard of wrecks. Sailors traveled these waters hoping for safe passage, only to meet darkness and uncertainty instead. Stories passed down through generations speak of vessels that vanished within sight of shore. Crews fought wind and wave, lanterns raised in desperate attempts to signal or find land. Many never reached safety. The island became a silent witness to those final moments. Some believe the footsteps and lantern lights are echoes of those sailors, still searching for the harbor that never came. Not in anger. Not in fear. But in longing. The movements feel repetitive, routine, as though the same search is being carried out night after night. The island itself seems to reflect this restlessness. At night, the air feels charged with awareness. Sounds carry farther than expected. A distant wave can sound like movement close by. Visitors walking alone after dark often describe the sensation of being followed. Not closely. Not aggressively. Just enough to be noticed. The feeling fades when they stop moving, as though whatever follows also pauses, waiting. Even familiar places take on a different character at night. Paths feel longer. Landmarks seem subtly altered by shadow and moonlight. The island feels less like a destination and more like a passage, a place between arrival and departure. The harbor, calm by day, becomes reflective and still. Water absorbs sound, turning the smallest splash into a sharp interruption. Reflections stretch and distort, making it difficult to judge distance. Watching the water too long can feel disorienting, as though depth itself is shifting. Locals speak of these experiences with quiet respect. They do not dramatize them. They acknowledge the island's past and accept that it left an imprint. Ocracoke is not described as dangerous, but as aware. A place that remembers. Many visitors leave with mixed emotions. They recall the island's beauty, the peaceful mornings, the gentle light over the water. But they also remember the footsteps on empty docks, the lanterns moving without source. And the feeling that something unseen walks the shoreline long after dark. The unease does not overwhelm. It lingers. A subtle presence that stays with people even after they return home. The sound of waves may bring back the memory of unseen movement. A distant light may feel briefly familiar. By morning, Ocracoke returns to its serene self. The docks are quiet and solid. The shoreline shows only sand and water. There are no lanterns. No footsteps. The island appears unchanged, bathed in sunlight and open sky. Yet those who have experienced the night know the difference. They understand that Ocracoke holds more than scenic views and coastal charm. It holds history shaped by loss and endurance, by journeys that ended too soon. The spirits spoken of are not said to haunt in anger. They wander in search of something familiar. Safe harbor. Solid ground. An end to the long passage through darkness. Ocracoke Island remains beautiful, open, and alive. But when the sun sets and the world grows quiet, the island reveals its other nature. A place where memory walks the docks. Where lanterns search the shore. And where the past still moves gently through salt air and shadow. Never fully at rest. Roanoke Island rests quietly along the edge of the Outer Banks, surrounded by water that shifts color with the sky. By day, it feels peaceful, shaped by marshland, trees, and open shoreline. The breeze carries salt and grass, and the land appears calm and unassuming. Yet beneath this still surface lies one of the greatest mysteries in American history, a story so unresolved that it seems to have settled into the soil itself. Long before modern homes and roads, this island held a fragile settlement that vanished without explanation. No signs of struggle were found. No remains were discovered. Only absence remained, sudden and complete. That absence has lingered for centuries, shaping how the island feels to those who walk its paths today. Visitors often describe an immediate sense of quiet unease when exploring the older areas of the island. The land feels open, yet strangely empty, as if something essential is missing. Footsteps sound louder than expected. Voices drop naturally, even among groups. It feels like a place where silence has weight. Near the areas believed to be close to the original settlement, whispers are sometimes heard. The sound is faint and indistinct, carried on the wind through tall grass and trees. But rather fragments of breath and sound woven together. The whispers seem to rise from the ground itself, drifting just beyond clear hearing. Those who pause to listen often feel uncertain whether the sound is real. When they move closer, the whispers fade. When they step away, the sound may return, subtle and persistent. It never resolves into words, yet it feels intentional, as though something is trying to be heard but cannot quite speak. As the sun lowers toward the horizon, the island changes again. Light softens across the water, and shadows stretch along the shoreline. It is at dusk that shadowy figures are most often reported. These shapes appear near the water's edge, standing where land meets tide. The figures are never clearly defined. They appear as outlines against the fading light, darker than the surrounding shadows. Some seem to face the water, others the land. They do not move quickly or dramatically. They simply exist for a moment, then dissolve as the light shifts or the observer blinks. No ripples mark the water. The shoreline returns to stillness. The emotional atmosphere of Roanoke Island is difficult to ignore. Many visitors speak of an overwhelming sense of abandonment that settles in slowly. It is not fear, but something deeper and more reflective. The feeling suggests waiting, as though the island itself expects the return of people who never came back. The water feels less like a boundary and more like a passage, one that carried people away without leaving a trace. The landscape itself seems to hold memory. Trees bend with the wind, roots gripping soil that has remained undisturbed for centuries. The marshland shifts quietly, absorbing sound. At times, the island feels like a pause in time, caught between past and present. Some visitors report sudden feelings of sadness without a clear cause. The emotion arrives gently but firmly, settling in the chest. Thoughts slow. Words feel unnecessary. The feeling does not overwhelm, but it lingers, shaping the experience in subtle ways. This sadness feels shared, not personal. It does not belong to any one individual. It feels tied to the land, to the unanswered mystery that defines the Islanda's history. The absence of closure seems to echo outward, affecting those who come seeking understanding. Even during the day, when sunlight brightens the island and birds call from the trees, the sense of something unfinished remains. The island does not feel hostile or threatening. Instead, it feels patient, holding on to its story without revealing it. At night, the atmosphere deepens. The water darkens, reflecting only faint points of light. The whispers may return, softer than before. The shoreline becomes harder to define, blending land and sea into a single dark expanse. The island feels larger, more distant from the modern world. Those who remain after dark often describe a heightened awareness. Every sound feels significant. Every movement draws attention. The sense of abandonment grows stronger, no longer just an idea but a physical presence. It becomes clear why the mystery of Roanoke Island endures. The land itself reinforces it. There are no clear answers here, only impressions and echoes. The island does not explain what happened. It simply reminds visitors that something did. As dawn approaches, the feeling begins to lift. Light returns to the water and land, restoring familiar shapes. The island looks peaceful once more, almost ordinary. Yet those who have walked its quieter paths and stood near its shoreline at dusk carry the experience with them. The sense of waiting does not disappear easily. It lingers in memory, subtle but persistent. Roanoke Island remains a place shaped by absence. It does not dramatize its mystery. It does not demand belief. It simply exists, holding on to its unanswered story. For visitors, the experience is less about what is seen and more about what is felt. The whispers that never become words. The figures that vanish with the light. The deep sense that the island is still waiting. Waiting for voices to return. Waiting for footsteps to cross the sand again. Waiting for those who left and never came back. And as the water continues to move around it, unchanged by time, Roanoke Island remains where it has always been, quiet and unresolved. Carrying its mystery not as a secret to be solved, but as a presence to be felt. Hatteras Island stretches long and narrow along the edge of the Atlantic, a strip of sand and wind caught between ocean and sound. By day, it feels open and bright, shaped by dunes, sea grass, and the steady pull of tides. Waves roll in with familiar rhythm, and the horizon appears endless. To visitors, the island seems peaceful, even inviting. Yet this coastline carries a darker reputation. Hatteras Island is known as part of the graveyard of the Atlantic, a name earned through centuries of treacherous waters. Shifting shoals, sudden storms, and powerful currents turned these waters into traps for passing ships. Long before modern navigation, vessels were pulled off course and broken apart within sight of shore. The sea here does not forget. Even today, shipwreck debris still washes ashore. After storms, fragments of timber, iron, and weathered planks emerge from the sand, smoothed by years of salt and motion. Sometimes these pieces appear unexpectedly, uncovered by shifting tides as if the ocean chose to return them. Each fragment carries a quiet reminder of journeys that never reached their destination. During daylight, the wreckage feels historical. Visitors examine the remains with curiosity, tracing hand-worn edges and imagining the ships they once belonged to. The sound of waves and gulls keeps the present firmly in place, softening the weight of the past. As evening approaches, the mood changes. Light fades slowly across the water, and the sky deepens into layered shades of gray and blue. Wind often rises near sunset, carrying the scent of salt farther inland. The ocean darkens, losing its detail until it becomes a wide, moving shadow. At night, the sea feels closer. Waves sound louder, their rhythm less predictable. The shoreline narrows, and the distance between land and water seems to shrink. It is during these hours that the most unsettling stories are told. Far out at sea, ghostly lights are seen drifting without direction. They appear low on the horizon, pale and unsteady, hovering just above the dark water. The lights wander slowly, sometimes separating, sometimes drawing close together, as if guided by no current or wind. No engines sound. No outlines of vessels appear. They neither approach nor retreat in predictable ways. They drift until they fade, leaving the ocean darker than before. Some nights, fog rolls in quietly. It blankets the water and shoreline alike, softening sound and swallowing distance. In these conditions, the lights are reported more often, glowing faintly through the mist like reflections without a source. Along with the lights, sound sometimes carries across the water. Bells are heard ringing through the fog, distant and hollow. The tone is slow and deliberate, rising and falling with measured rhythm. It does not resemble nearby navigation markers, and it does not follow a consistent pattern. The bells seem to come from far offshore. Listeners strain to pinpoint the source, but direction feels uncertain. The sound travels through fog and open water, bending in ways that make distance difficult to judge. When the ringing stops, the silence that follows feels unusually deep. These bells are heard even on calm nights. The sea may be smooth, the wind light, yet the sound carries clearly for a brief time before vanishing. Those who hear it often describe a chill, not from cold air, but from the sudden awareness of how vast and empty the ocean feels. Hatteras Island has seen countless final moments. Ships caught in storms broke apart quickly here, leaving little chance for rescue. The water took crews and cargo alike, scattering remains across the seabed. Over time, the number of wrecks grew so large that the coastline became synonymous with loss. Some believe the lights and bells are echoes of those disasters. Lanterns once burned on decks during night crossings, guiding crew through darkness. Bells rang to signal danger, timing, and position. In moments of crisis, these sounds and lights would have been constant, filling the air and water with urgency. The island may still hold those impressions. When conditions align, the past seems to surface briefly, not as clear memory, but as fragments of sensation. Atmospheric conditions can bend light across long distances. Fog can carry sound in unusual ways. Reflections from distant vessels may appear distorted by waves and mist. Yet these explanations do not fully account for how consistently the experiences are reported, or how deeply they affect those who witness them. The emotional response is often immediate. Those watching the lights feel a sense of unease mixed with sadness. The drifting glow does not feel threatening, but lonely. The drifting glow does not feel threatening, but lonely. The bells do not warn so much as mourn, their sound lingering in the mind long after it fades from the air. People walking the beach at night often stop without realizing it. They listen. They watch. Time feels suspended, as if the island itself is holding a breath. The ocean, usually endless in motion, seems to pause around these moments. When the lights vanish and the bells fall silent, the sea resumes its rhythm. Waves return to their familiar sound. Fog thins or drifts away. The horizon empties. Yet the stillness that follows feels heavier than before, filled with awareness rather than calm. By morning, Hatteras Island looks unchanged. Sunlight reveals dunes, water, and scattered debris along the shore. The ocean sparkles, and the stories of the night feel distant, almost unreal. Visitors walk the beach unaware of what may have been seen hours earlier. But those who witnessed the lights or heard the bells remember clearly. The image of drifting glow returns in quiet moments. The sound of bells echoes faintly in memory whenever fog appears. The island never feels entirely empty again. Hatteras Island continues to stand at the edge of the Atlantic, shaped by wind and tide. Shipwreck debris still washes ashore, silent evidence of what the sea has taken. At night, ghostly lights may drift far out on dark water, moving without direction. Bells may ring softly through the fog, even when the ocean is calm. The graveyard of the Atlantic lives on, not in spectacle or fear, but in quiet reminders. The sea remembers. And on Hatteras Island, when darkness settles and fog rolls in, the past sometimes rises just long enough to be seen and heard, before sinking back into the endless moving water. Portsmouth Island lies just beyond the mainland, separated by water and time. Once a thriving village, it now stands completely abandoned, its structures scattered across sand and grass as if paused in the middle of ordinary life. The island feels distant even before arrival. The journey across the water creates a sense of leaving the present behind, moving toward a place where sound and movement behave differently. By day, the island appears quiet and open. Sunlight washes over empty houses, a small church, and weathered buildings slowly yielding to wind and salt. Sand drifts against doorsteps. Wooden porches creak softly underfoot. The village layout remains intact, yet no one lives here anymore. The absence feels deliberate, as though the island chose solitude rather than losing it. During daylight hours, Portsmouth Island feels calm, almost peaceful. Birds move freely through open windows. Grass grows where paths once bustled with footsteps. The ocean surrounds everything, its steady presence a reminder that this place was shaped by both opportunity and hardship. Visitors walk slowly, aware they are guests in a space that remembers being occupied. As evening approaches, the atmosphere changes. The sky darkens, and shadows stretch across the sand. The wind picks up briefly, then settles, leaving behind a deeper quiet. With fewer natural sounds, the island feels enclosed, as though the open landscape has folded inward. The buildings seem closer together, their empty windows watching without expression. It is after sunset that many visitors begin to notice unsettling sounds. Doors slam in empty houses without warning. The noise is sharp and sudden, echoing across the open space. Those who hear it often turn toward the sound, expecting to see a door swinging in the wind. Instead, they find doors closed and still. There is no rush of air. No shifting sand. The houses remain silent again, as if nothing happened. The sound does not repeat immediately. It arrives once, then disappears, leaving behind a silence that feels heavier than before. Footsteps are another commonly reported experience. As darkness settles fully, visitors walking along sandy paths sometimes hear steps echoing behind them. The sound is clear and rhythmic, matching the pace of a human walk. Each footfall presses into the sand audibly, then lifts, repeating with steady timing. Yet when walking resumes, the footsteps return, lingering just behind, never catching up, never falling away. These footsteps are often heard long after sunset, when the island should be completely still. The sound travels farther than expected, crossing open sand and narrow lanes between buildings. It does not behave like an echo. It feels too close, too deliberate. Stopping does not always make the sound stop. Sometimes the footsteps continue for a moment, then fade slowly, as though choosing when to leave. Other times, they pause instantly, creating the unsettling impression of something listening. The silence of Portsmouth Island plays a powerful role in these experiences. Without traffic, electricity, or modern life, the quiet becomes overwhelming. Every small sound stands out sharply. A shifting shadow near a building. A faint sound near the edge of hearing. The island seems to respond to presence, acknowledging those who walk its paths after dark. Locals and historians know that Portsmouth Island was once full of life. Families lived here. Children played along these sandy paths. Doors opened and closed countless times each day. Footsteps marked the ground with routine and familiarity. Over time, storms and changing conditions forced people to leave, but the structures remained. Some believe the island never truly let go of its rhythm. The doors slamming may be echoes of daily life replaying themselves, moments repeated so often they left impressions behind. The footsteps could be traces of movement embedded into the landscape, surfacing only when the environment grows quiet enough to reveal them. Others suggest natural explanations. Wood expands and contracts with temperature changes. Wind can travel unpredictably across open land. Sand carries sound farther at night. The mind, isolated and alert, can misinterpret familiar noises. These explanations offer comfort, yet they do not fully account for the consistency of reports. Visitors with no prior knowledge describe the same experiences. Doors slamming in empty houses. Footsteps following along sandy paths. A sense of unseen movement that never fully reveals itself. Standing still in the middle of the village after dark can feel overwhelming. The silence presses down, heavy and expectant. The absence of light and sound creates the impression that something is about to happen, even when nothing does. Some visitors describe a growing awareness of being watched, not from a single point, but from the space itself. The feeling does not come with fear at first. It arrives as alertness, a subtle shift that makes every sense sharpen. The ocean surrounding Portsmouth Island adds to the effect. Waves break steadily along the shore, their sound distant but constant. The water creates a boundary, reinforcing the feeling of isolation. Once night falls, leaving the island does not feel immediate or simple. The village becomes its own world, separate from the mainland and its noise. Those who remain overnight often report restless sleep. Sounds drift in and out of awareness. A door slam in the distance. Footsteps that seem too close to ignore. The mind struggles to determine what is real and what belongs to memory. By morning, the island feels different again. Light returns, and the heavy silence softens. The sounds of the night do not repeat. Yet the memory lingers. Visitors often leave Portsmouth Island with a sense that the place is not empty in the way abandoned spaces usually are. It feels occupied by absence itself, shaped by what once was rather than what remains. Portsmouth Island does not rely on dramatic displays or visible figures. Its unease comes from subtle interruption. Sound where there should be none. Movement without a source. Movement without a source. Silence that feels weighted rather than peaceful. Once a thriving village, now completely abandoned, the island stands as a quiet witness to its own history. At night, when doors slam in empty houses and footsteps echo across sandy paths, the past feels close enough to touch. Here, the silence is never complete. It is broken gently, deliberately, by unseen movement that reminds visitors they are not just walking through empty buildings, but through a place that still remembers being alive. Bank stretches along the edge of the Atlantic like a narrow ribbon of sand, remote and windswept, shaped by tide and storm rather than human design. The land feels fragile here, constantly shifting under the pressure of wind and water. By day, the isolation feels peaceful. By night, it feels absolute. Reaching Banks requires intention. There are no busy roads or crowded paths. Only long stretches of beach and the steady sound of surf. The wind is nearly constant, moving across the land with a voice of its own. It carries salt, sand, and the faint scent of seaweed, erasing footprints almost as quickly as they are made. Even in calm weather, the place feels exposed. As though nothing here is meant to remain for long. During daylight hours, the water glints under the sun, and waves roll in with measured rhythm. Birds skim the surface, and distant islands blur into the haze. The vastness invites reflection, encouraging visitors to stand quietly and watch the sea. Yet many describe an undercurrent of unease, a feeling that the emptiness is not complete. As the sun lowers, Banks begins to change. Light softens, colors fade, and the boundary between land and water becomes less distinct. Mist forms near the surface, rising in thin layers that drift inland before dissolving. The wind strengthens, carrying sound in unpredictable ways. It is during these hours that people report seeing figures at the water's edge. From a distance, the shapes appear human. A solitary figure stands near the surf, facing the open sea, unmoving. Those who notice the figures often pause, unsure whether they are seeing a person or a trick of light. The shoreline plays with perception, reflections and shadows blending easily into illusion. When approached, the figure does not react. There is no turn of the head, no movement of arms or legs. It remains fixed in place until the distance closes. Then, without warning, it vanishes. The mist thickens briefly, rolling across the sand, and when it clears, the shoreline is empty once more. The sea continues its steady motion, indifferent and unchanged. The disappearance feels deliberate, as though the figure chose the moment to withdraw. These sightings are often brief but leave a lasting impression. Different visitors describe similar experiences, always at the edge of the water, always facing the sea. The figures never move inland. They belong to the boundary between land and ocean, appearing where the two meet and nowhere else. As night settles fully, the wind becomes the dominant presence. It rises and falls, sweeping across the dunes and shoreline with increasing force. Within its sound, some report hearing voices. These are not clear words or familiar tones. The voices stretch and distort, layered within the wind itself. Rising and falling in unnatural patterns. The sound does not resemble speech as people know it. It is rhythmic but irregular, carrying emotion without language. Others hear urgency. They drift through the air, then fade, only to return moments later from another direction. What once felt like natural sound now feels crowded with intention. Turning toward the sound offers no clarity. The whispering sound creates a sense of unease and disorientation. Those who remain on the beach after dark often feel watched. The sensation does not come from behind or beside, but from the vastness ahead. The open sea feels attentive, as though something beyond sight is aware of those standing on the shore. The feeling urges caution, a quiet insistence to leave. The figures and voices are often linked in memory. Others remember the voices arriving before the figure appears, as if announcing something about to take shape. There is no pattern that can be predicted, only an understanding that the two belong to the same experience. Core. Banks. Has. Long. Been. Shaped. By. Loss. And. Passage. Of. Ships. Once. Traveled. Close. To. Shore. And. Shifting. Sandbars. And. Storms. Rose. Quickly. And. Not. Every. Journey. Ended. Safely. The. Land. Offered. Little. Protection. To. What. It. Would. And. The. Land. Offered. Little. Protection. To. What. It. Would. And. The. Land. Offered. Little. Protection. To. What. It. Would. Some believe the figures at the water's edge are echoes of those who never left the sea behind. Not spirits in a traditional sense, but impressions formed by countless moments of waiting, watching, and longing. The shoreline becomes a place where those moments surface briefly before dissolving back into mist. What makes Core Banks especially unsettling is the restraint of these encounters. There are no sudden movements, no dramatic displays. Everything unfolds slowly, quietly, as if the land itself is unsure whether it should reveal anything at all. The figures never chase. The voices never call directly. They simply exist, briefly overlapping with the present. Those who leave the beach after such experiences often do so in silence. The wind follows them for a time, carrying the sound of surf and something else beneath it. Sleep afterward comes lightly, filled with dreams of open water and distant shapes standing just beyond reach. By morning, Core Banks returns to its daytime calm. The mist lifts. The wind softens. The shoreline looks empty and familiar again. Footprints appear fresh in the sand, unaccompanied by anything unusual. It becomes easy to doubt what was seen or heard the night before. Yet those who experienced it remember clearly. The still figure at the water's edge. The sudden disappearance. The voices woven into the wind. These memories remain vivid, tied to the rhythm of waves and the sound of moving air. Ocracoke Banks continues to exist at the mercy of sea and sky, remote and exposed, shaped by forces older than memory. It does not advertise its mysteries. It does not promise answers. It simply waits. When the wind rises and mist drifts across the shoreline, figures may stand briefly at the edge of the world, staring out to sea. When approached, they fade into nothing. And within the wind, voices carry on, unfamiliar and unclaimed. Reminding those who listen that some places speak in ways not meant to be understood, only felt. Ocracoke Bank stretches along the edge of the Atlantic, a narrow barrier island shaped by wind, water, and time. By day, it feels open and alive. Wild horses roam freely across dunes and grass, their movements calm and unbothered by human presence. The island appears untouched, a place where nature follows its own quiet rhythm. Sunlight reflects off pale sand, and the sound of waves feels steady and reassuring. Visitors walk the beaches, watching horses graze and listening to seabirds cry overhead. During daylight hours, Ocracoke Banks feels peaceful, even welcoming. It is easy to believe the island is gentle, timeless, and safe. But as evening approaches, the character of the island begins to change. The sun sinks low, and long shadows stretch across the dunes. The horses slowly disappear into the interior, becoming dark shapes against fading light. The wind shifts, carrying salt and dampness from the sea. The island grows quieter, as though it is preparing for something unseen. When night fully settles, Ocracoke Banks feels entirely different. The open landscape that once felt expansive now feels exposed. The sound of waves grows louder, closer, filling the silence between breaths. Visitors often describe an immediate sense of awareness, the feeling that they are no longer alone. At night, many report the sensation of being watched. Not from a specific direction, but from everywhere at once. The shoreline seems to shift as the tide moves, erasing footprints almost as soon as they are made. The island feels alert, attentive to every movement. Some visitors describe hearing breathing close to their ears. The sound is soft and intimate, warm against the cool night air. It arrives suddenly, just behind the shoulder or beside the head, lasting only a second or two. When they turn, there is nothing there. No movement. Only the endless darkness and the steady crash of waves. The breathing never feels aggressive. It does not rush or grow louder. It simply appears, then vanishes, leaving behind a rush of adrenaline and confusion. Those who experience it often stand frozen, listening intently, unsure whether they want the sound to return or not. Even those who hear nothing describe an overwhelming sense of presence. The island feels occupied in the dark, as though unseen figures move just beyond sight. Every rustle of grass sounds intentional. Every shift of sand feels watched. The boundary between imagination and environment becomes difficult to separate. Ocracoke Banks carries a long and tragic maritime history. The waters surrounding the island are known for treacherous currents and sudden storms. Over centuries, countless ships ran aground here, broken apart by waves and wind. Survivors sometimes reached the island, exhausted and injured, stranded far from help. Stories passed down through generations speak of sailors who wandered the island searching for rescue that never came. Lanterns were raised. Fires were lit. Voices called into the darkness, hoping to be heard by passing ships or distant shorelines. Many perished before help arrived. Some believe the spirits of those shipwreck survivors still wander Shackleford Banks, unable to leave. The idea is not that they are trapped in anger or fear, but in longing. Searching endlessly for safety, for direction, for a way off the island. The breathing heard at night is often linked to this belief. It is described not as a threat, but as a reminder of human presence where none should exist. The sound feels close because it once was. People struggled here. They breathed hard against wind and cold, pushing themselves forward when strength was nearly gone. The island itself seems to remember. At night, the dunes appear to shift shape, their outlines changing as clouds pass over the moon. Paths walked during the day feel unfamiliar, longer, harder to navigate. The sense of direction becomes unreliable. Some visitors report feeling disoriented, as though the island subtly redirects movement. The island feels emptied of life, yet full of something else. Standing still on Shackleford Banks after dark can feel overwhelming. The silence is never complete. Wind moves across grass. Waves strike the shore. Yet beneath those sounds is another layer, one that feels closer, more personal. A presence that does not announce itself, but remains aware. Visitors often describe a strong urge to leave after sunset. The feeling does not come from panic, but from instinct. A quiet understanding that the island belongs to something else at night. Those who stay longer than intended often regret it, carrying the unease with them long after returning to the mainland. As dawn approaches, the atmosphere slowly shifts again. The heaviness lifts. The sense of being watched fades. The horses reappear, moving calmly across the land as if nothing unusual occurred. The island regains its daylight identity. In the morning, Shackleford Banks feels gentle once more. Footprints in the sand lead nowhere. There is no sign of breathing in the dark, no trace of unseen presence. To someone arriving fresh, it is simply a beautiful barrier island shaped by nature. But those who have stood there at night remember the difference. They remember the closeness of unseen breath. The way the darkness felt alive. The sense that the island was not empty, only waiting. The belief that some who arrived here long ago never truly departed. Shackleford Banks remains a place of wild beauty and quiet mystery. By day, it belongs to horses, wind, and sea. By night, it belongs to memory. A place where the past moves softly through dunes and darkness. Where lost journeys still echo. Where the island watches quietly as waves continue their endless passage. Those who visit carry both versions of the island with them. The beauty seen in sunlight. And the unease felt in shadow. Together, they form the true nature of Shackleford Banks. A place where freedom and loss share the same shore. And where some spirits may still wander. Unable to leave the land that once gave them refuge. And took it away just as quickly. Bogue Bank stretches along the coast as a narrow ribbon of sand, bordered by rolling ocean on one side and quiet sounds on the other. By day, it feels inviting and relaxed. Vacation homes line the shore. Families walk the beach. The air carries salt and sunlight, and the island appears built for rest and escape. Yet beneath this calm surface, Bogue Banks holds darker stories that never fully faded. Long before modern houses and paved roads, this island faced storms. Shipwrecks, and long periods of isolation. The ocean shaped every part of life here, providing sustenance while demanding respect. Over time, people came and went, leaving behind traces of struggle and survival that blended into the sand. Those traces still seem to linger, quietly influencing the atmosphere. Guests arriving for peaceful stays often sense something unusual almost immediately. The houses feel solid and well kept, yet certain rooms seem colder than others, even on warm days. A sudden chill along the arms. A breath that fogs slightly where it should not. Then the sensation fades as quickly as it appeared. These cold spots often form near the beach-facing rooms. Guests report stepping from warmth into a pocket of cold air that has no clear source. Windows are closed. Doors are locked. Air conditioning is off. Still, the chill remains for a moment, then vanishes as though it never existed. At night, the island becomes quieter. The sound of waves grows louder as human activity settles. Lights from houses dot the shoreline, leaving long stretches of beach in shadow. It is during these hours that reports of shadows moving through locked rooms begin to surface. Guests describe seeing dark shapes pass along walls or doorways, slow and deliberate. The movement feels purposeful rather than random. When lights are turned on, nothing is there. Doors remain locked. Windows show no sign of disturbance. The shadows do not behave like reflections from passing cars or moonlight. They appear where light should not reach, gliding across interior spaces without casting clear outlines. Some guests feel watched in these moments, standing still as if waiting for the room to settle again. What makes these experiences unsettling is their repetition. Different homes. Different visitors. Similar stories. Shadows passing through rooms that were secured. Cold spots forming in the same areas night after night. Each incident feels isolated, yet together they suggest a pattern that is difficult to ignore. The beach itself carries a different kind of presence. By day, the shoreline feels open and bright. Waves roll in steadily, children play in the surf, and the horizon feels endless. But even then, some visitors notice a constant tension in the water. The ocean here never feels completely calm. At dusk, the water darkens quickly. The wind shifts, and the waves take on a heavier rhythm. The sound grows deeper, more insistent. Standing at the edge of the shore, many describe the ocean as restless, as though it is always moving towards something unseen. This restlessness seems to mirror the island's atmosphere. The waves do not simply break and retreat. They push forward again and again, reshaping the sand with quiet determination. The ocean feels aware of the land, pressing against it without pause. Some guests report feeling sudden unease while walking the beach at night. The air feels colder near the waterline. Footsteps sound louder against the sand. The sense of isolation deepens, even when others are nearby. The Oceania's movement feels less natural and more deliberate. There are moments when the shoreline feels watched, not from the land, but from the water itself. The darkness beyond the waves feels thick, hiding depth and distance. The ocean seems to hold memory, carrying stories that were never finished. Inside the homes, the combination of cold spots and moving shadows creates a quiet tension. Guests describe waking suddenly in the night, feeling the room shift around them. The air grows colder. The silence feels heavier. Then the sensation fades, leaving only the sound of waves outside. Many choose not to speak openly about these experiences until after leaving the island. The stories are shared carefully, often with hesitation. Some laugh them off, unsure how to explain what they felt. Others admit they left early, unable to fully relax despite the beauty surrounding them. The emotional impact of Bogue Banks is subtle but persistent. It does not overwhelm visitors with fear. Instead, it creates a low level of unease that lingers beneath enjoyment. The island feels layered, as though modern life rests atop something older and unresolved. This sense of unresolved presence may come from the island's history with storms and loss. Shipwrecks once occurred offshore, sending crews and cargo into uncertain waters. Lives were shaped by the ocean's unpredictability. The land remembers. The sand shifts. The water continues its endless movement. These elements shape how the island feels long after specific events are forgotten. Late at night, when lights dim and the beach empties, the cold spots return briefly. Shadows pass where no one stands. The ocean continues its restless rhythm, never fully at ease. By morning, the island appears unchanged. Sunlight warms the sand. The cold is gone. The rooms feel normal again. The shadows are nowhere to be seen. The ocean sparkles under open sky. Yet those who experienced the island after dark carry something with them. The memory of sudden chills. The sight of movement where nothing should be. The feeling that the ocean was watching rather than simply moving. Bogue Banks continues to welcome visitors with beauty and calm on the surface. But beneath that comfort, the island holds onto its darker stories. It does not reveal them fully. It allows them to surface quietly, in shadows. In cold air. In the restless motion of the sea. And for those who notice, Bogue Banks becomes more than a destination. Bogue Banks becomes more than a destination. It becomes a place where the past still breathes beneath the present. Where the ocean never truly rests. And where the island itself seems aware of everything that has come and gone along its shores. Bald Head Island rests at the edge of the Carolina coast, where river meets sea and the land narrows into quiet elegance. By day, it feels refined and calm. White sand beaches stretch wide and clean, maritime forests sway gently, and historic buildings stand carefully preserved. Visitors move slowly here, guided by bicycles and footpaths rather than noise or traffic. Everything appears intentional, peaceful, and welcoming. In daylight, the island feels curated. Sunlight filters through live oaks and palmettos, casting soft shadows along winding trails. Homes and inns sit neatly among the trees, their windows bright and open. The air carries salt and warmth, and the island feels like a retreat shaped for rest. As evening approaches, the tone begins to change. Shadows lengthen across the sand and forest paths. The breeze cools, carrying sound farther than before. The breeze cools, carrying sound farther than before. The island grows quieter, not abruptly, but gradually. As if preparing for something unseen. Visitors often remark that the stillness feels deeper after sunset, more focused. As if preparing for something unseen. Visitors often remark that the stillness feels deeper after sunset, more focused, as though the island is listening. Once night fully settles, Bald Head Island reveals another side. Laughter and music are sometimes heard drifting through the darkness. The sound is light and distant, joyful rather than threatening. The sound is light and distant, joyful rather than threatening. It carries across open spaces and through the trees, echoing briefly before softening. Those who hear it often assume a gathering must be nearby. Paths lead only to empty clearings and darkened porches. The music fades as soon as it is approached, leaving behind a quiet that feels newly heavy. The laughter does not repeat immediately, appearing again later from a different direction, as if moving just out of reach. Lights add to the confusion. In buildings known to be empty, windows glow faintly at night. The illumination is steady and warm, resembling lamplight rather than harsh electric brightness. Visitors pause, watching closely. They expect doors to open or figures to pass by, but nothing follows. The buildings remain silent. When checked again, the lights are gone, leaving behind dark glass that reflects only moonlight and trees. Some say the lights feel intentional. They do not flicker or fail. They simply appear, remain briefly, and disappear, as if someone chose when to be seen and when to retreat. The timing feels deliberate rather than accidental. Within the maritime forest, another sensation emerges. People walking the trails at night often feel as though they are being followed. The sensation begins subtly, a heightened awareness of movement behind them. Footsteps seem to echo faintly, just out of sync with their own. When they stop, the sound stops. When they turn, the path behind them is empty. The tree stands still, and the darkness holds its shape. Yet as soon as they resume walking, the sensation returns, pressing closer, matching pace without revealing itself. The feeling is not aggressive. Instead, it feels like company that refuses to announce itself. The presence remains just beyond vision, moving through the trees with quiet patience. Bald Head Island has a long and layered history. It has been a place of arrival and departure for centuries, shaped by trade, storms, and isolation. People came here seeking opportunity, safety, or escape. Others passed through briefly, leaving impressions that lingered longer than expected. The laughter and music heard at night feel celebratory, like echoes of gatherings long past. Social evenings, dances, and shared moments once filled these spaces. Some believe the island holds on to those memories, releasing fragments when the present grows quiet enough. The lights in empty buildings may reflect that same remembrance. Homes that once glowed with life now sit dark most nights. Yet occasionally, they shine again, as if recalling what it meant to be occupied. The warmth feels nostalgic rather than alarming, though its sudden appearance unsettles those who witness it. The forest trails carry a different energy. Here, the sense of being followed feels older, more instinctive. Maritime forests are dense and twisting, limiting sight and sound. Even during the day, they encourage awareness. At night, that awareness sharpens into something more personal. Visitors often report a strong urge to keep moving. Stopping feels uncomfortable, as if lingering too long invites attention. Some quicken their pace without realizing it, guided by instinct rather than reason. When they reach open areas or well-lit paths, the sensation fades. Despite these experiences, the island does not feel hostile. There are no sudden disturbances, no loud warnings or threats. Everything unfolds gently, quietly, as if guided by restraint. The laughter never turns into shouting. The presence in the trees never reveals itself fully. This restraint is what makes the island unsettling. The mystery does not demand fear. It invites curiosity, then leaves questions unanswered. Those who stay long enough begin to feel that Bald Head Island observes as much as it is observed. The laughter fades. The music dissolves into memory. Lights no longer appear in dark windows. The forest quiets, and the sense of being followed loosens its hold. Only wind and distant surf remain. Morning restores familiarity. Sunlight returns warmth and clarity. Paths feel safe again. Buildings stand quiet and unlit. The forest becomes simply trees and shadow. To those arriving fresh, the island feels serene and refined. Untouched by mystery. Yet for those who experience the night, Bald Head Island never looks the same. The sound of distant laughter lingers in thought. Empty windows seem more watchful than before. Forest trails feel deeper, more layered. The island feels alive in ways that are difficult to explain. Elegant by day, haunting by night, Bald Head Island carries both faces with equal grace. It offers beauty, calm, and refinement under the sun. After dark, it reveals memory, presence, and quiet movement. Visitors may hear laughter and music from nowhere. Lights may glow in empty buildings. Some may feel followed through the trees. The island does not chase or confront. It simply remembers. And when night falls again and the paths grow quiet, Bald Head Island continues to walk beside the past, allowing it to surface softly, then fade back into shadow, leaving only the feeling that something shared the journey, unseen and unspoken. Wrightsville Beach Island feels alive under the sun. By day, the shoreline is busy with movement and sound. Waves roll in steadily, beachgoers walk the sand. And the air carries laughter and conversation. The ocean reflects bright light. And the island feels open, welcoming, and familiar. As evening approaches, the energy slowly drains away. Shops close, foot traffic thins. And the beach begins to empty. The sky darkens over the water. And the horizon blurs into a single deep line. What felt vibrant only hours earlier starts to feel distant. As if the island is slipping into another state entirely. After dark, Wrightsville Beach Island becomes unsettling. The sound of waves grows louder without the daytime noise to soften it. Wind moves across the sand in slow, uneven patterns. The open space that once felt freeing now feels exposed. It is during these late hours that visitors report seeing figures near the water. From a distance, shapes appear along the shoreline, standing where the sand meets the surf. They look like people walking calmly toward the ocean, their silhouettes dark against the pale reflection of the water. Those who notice them often stop and watch, assuming they are night swimmers or late walkers. The figures continue forward, wading deeper into the surf. Then, without any sign of struggle or sound, they vanish. No movement follows. No return to shore. Looking again reveals only empty shoreline and shifting waves. These sightings are brief but vivid. The figures never turn back. They never react to voices or movement. They simply walk forward until they are gone. The absence that follows feels heavier than the sight itself. Alongside these reports, whispers are often heard drifting along the shoreline late at night. The sound is soft and close, carried just above the noise of the waves. The sound does not form clear words, only murmurs that rise and fall like breath. The whispers seem to travel with the wind, staying just out of reach. Walking along the beach, people hear the sound move beside them. Matching their pace, the sound persists. Stopping causes the whispers to fade. Only to return when movement resumes. Turning toward the sound reveals nothing but dark water and sand. The whispers do not call out or demand attention. They exist quietly, persistent but restrained. Listening closely does not clarify them. Instead, the sound becomes more diffuse. As though it is coming from everywhere at once. The ocean plays a powerful role in shaping the atmosphere here. At night, the water feels closer, more dominant. Waves break with steady force, and the tide pulls rhythmically, creating a constant sense of motion. The boundary between land and sea feels thin, easily crossed. Standing near the waterline after dark can bring a sudden feeling of unease. Some describe a tightening in the chest or a sense of being drawn forward. The pull is subtle, not physical, but emotional, as though the shoreline itself is urging movement. Locals familiar with Wrightsville Beach Island speak cautiously about the night. Stories are shared quietly, often without detail. The island has a long relationship with the sea. For generations, people have worked, traveled, and lived by these waters. The ocean has provided opportunity and taken lives in equal measure. The memory of that relationship feels present at night, carried in sound and movement rather than visible form. Some believe the figures seen entering the surf are echoes of those who never returned from the water. Not spirits in the traditional sense, but impressions left behind by moments repeated in fear and urgency. Others believe the sightings are reflections shaped by darkness, distance, and expectation. The whispers, too, invite explanation. Wind moving across uneven shoreline can produce strange sounds. Waves interacting with objects beneath the surface can create murmurs that feel intentional. The mind, alert in darkness, may search for meaning where there is none. Yet these explanations do not fully satisfy those who experience the phenomena. Visitors with no prior knowledge of the island describe the same details. Figures walking into the surf and vanishing. Whispers that drift alongside without forming words. A growing sense of discomfort that fades only when leaving the beach. Remaining on the shoreline for extended periods can feel draining. The quiet attention of the space wears down the senses. Even confident individuals report an urge to leave without understanding why. The feeling does not resemble panic. It feels more like being out of place. Even confident individuals report an urge to leave without understanding why. The feeling does not resemble panic. It feels more like being out of place. The quiet attention of the space wears down the senses. Remaining on the shoreline for extended periods can feel draining. Even confident individuals report an urge to leave without understanding why. The feeling does not resemble panic. It feels more like being out of place. The quiet attention of the space wears down the senses. The feeling fades only when leaving the beach. A growing sense of discomfort that fades only when leaving the beach. Visitors with no prior knowledge of the island describe the same details. Moving away from the water brings gradual relief. The whispers fade. The sense of pull loosens. Lights and structures reintroduce familiar boundaries, grounding the experience. Looking back, the beach appears calm and empty, offering no sign of what was just felt. By morning, Wrightsville Beach Island returns to its daytime rhythm. Sunlight fills the shore. The ocean sparkles. Footprints cover the sand. The unsettling aspects of the night disappear completely, leaving no trace behind. Yet those who experienced the island after dark often carry the memory with them. The sight of figures walking into the surf and never returning. The whispers that followed without speaking. The feeling that the shoreline was watching, waiting. Wrightsville Beach Island exists in two states. The same sand and water, shaped by different light and sound. At night, the island does not announce danger or demand attention. The ocean grows louder. The shoreline grows quieter. And in that space between wave and sand, unseen movement reminds visitors that not every place rests when the sun goes down. The sea keeps its own rhythm. And the island listens. Masonboro Island lies just offshore, separated from the mainland by a narrow stretch of water that feels wider than it is. Completely uninhabited, the island has no buildings, no permanent structures, and no signs of daily human life. Sand, dunes, and marshland stretch across its length, shaped constantly by wind and tide. From a distance, it looks calm and untouched, a quiet place left to nature alone. Reaching the island is simple. But staying there feels different. Boats pull up along the shoreline. Engines cut. And the sound of water replaces everything else. The air smells of salt and grass. And the land opens wide in every direction. At first, the emptiness feels peaceful. Walking inland, the dunes rise gently, their slopes marked only by wind patterns and scattered shells. Footsteps sink softly into the sand, leaving clear impressions behind. The island feels open, exposed, as if there is nowhere to hide. Visitors often remark on how aware they feel of their own presence here, each movement standing out against the quiet. As time passes, that awareness begins to shift. The silence does not remain empty. It grows dense, layered, as if something is listening. Sounds behave strangely on Masonboro Island. A footstep echoes longer than expected. The wind carries noise unevenly, sometimes falling completely still, sometimes rushing suddenly through the grass. The island feels less like a place being visited and more like a place that is observing. It is not long before the voices begin. Visitors report hearing their names called from the dunes. The voice sounds familiar, close enough to feel personal, yet distant enough to avoid identification. It does not shout. It speaks clearly, calmly, as if calling from just beyond a ridge of sand. The sound cuts through the wind, unmistakable and precise. Instinctively, people turn toward the voice. The dunes ahead remain empty. No movement breaks the line of sand and sky. When the visitor responds or steps closer, the voice does not answer back. Instead, it fades, leaving behind a silence that feels heavier than before. The calling often repeats. A name spoken again from another direction. Sometimes softer, sometimes clearer. The voice never carries urgency, never demands attention. Its calmness is what unsettles most. It sounds certain, as though it expects to be heard. Alongside the voices, footprints begin to appear. Walking across open sand, visitors notice impressions forming beside their own. The footprints match their pace, appearing parallel and close, as if someone is walking alongside them just out of sight. Looking down reveals clear marks in the sand, shaped like human steps, fresh and defined. Stopping causes the footprints to stop. Moving again causes them to continue. When visitors turn to look for another person, they find only empty dunes and wind-swept grass. There are no figures, no shadows, no sign of anyone else on the island. The footprints remain, stretching backward across the sand until they fade into nothing. Some attempt to follow the trail. Others avoid looking down. The island begins to feel alive. The ground feels responsive. The air feels attentive. Even standing still. The openness that once felt freeing. Offering no shelter from awareness. Voices continue to surface, always calling names, never repeating the same pattern. Sometimes the sound comes from the dunes. Other times it drifts from the marsh. Occasionally it seems to rise directly behind the listener, close enough to feel breath, yet nothing is ever there. The wind carries the sound differently each time, distorting it just enough to prevent certainty. The voice never sounds threatening. It does not plead or command. It simply calls, as though reminding the listener that they are not alone. Fear grows slowly on Masonboro Island. It does not arrive as panic, but as recognition. The understanding that the island is not indifferent to presence. Many visitors report a strong urge to leave after these experiences. The feeling is not sudden, but persistent, building with each step. The sand feels heavier. Movement feels deliberate. Even the open shoreline begins to feel confined. Those who stay longer often describe the sensation of being guided. Paths seem to suggest themselves. Voices call from certain directions. Footprints appear closer. The island feels active, not chaotic, but intentional, as though responding to attention. Masonboro Island has no recorded permanent settlement, no abandoned buildings, and no visible remnants of past habitation. Yet the land has seen countless visitors over time, fishermen, explorers, travelers who crossed its sands briefly before leaving again. Some believe the island holds echoes of passage. Moments of arrival and departure layered into the landscape. Others suggest the isolation itself shapes perception, heightening awareness until the mind fills the silence. But those who experience the voices and footprints insist it feels external, not imagined. What makes Masonboro Island especially unsettling is its restraint. Nothing is shown directly. There are no visible figures, no dramatic signs. Everything happens just out of reach, leaving only evidence behind. A voice without a speaker. Presence without form. Leaving the island brings immediate relief. The moment feet touch the boat or shallow water, the pressure eases. The voices do not follow across the channel. The footprints stop at the edge of the sand. The island remains behind, quiet and unchanged. Yet the memory does not fade easily. Visitors recall the exact sound of their name carried on the wind. They remember looking down to see steps beside their own. These details remain vivid, returning unexpectedly long after the visit ends. Sleep after visiting Masonboro Island is often restless. Dreams feature open dunes, shifting sand, and voices calling from unseen places. Waking brings the sense that something was left unfinished, that the island noticed the departure. By daylight, Masonboro Island looks serene once more. The dunes rest under the sun. The shoreline curves gently. The birds move freely. And the sand shows only natural patterns. It becomes difficult to believe the place felt so hostile hours earlier. Yet those who have walked its interior know the difference. The island feels alive, not in a welcoming way, but in an aware one. It does not seek visitors, nor does it drive them away violently. It simply acknowledges them. Masonboro Island remains uninhabited, untouched by permanent human presence. It stands as a place where nature feels alert, where sound and space behave differently. When voices call from the dunes and footprints appear beside solitary travelers, the island reminds them that emptiness does not mean absence. Here, the land watches. The wind speaks. And those who listen too long discover that some places do not want to be explored, only respected, and left alone. Opsail Island stretches along the coast as a long ribbon of sand, shaped by wind, tide, and time. By day, it feels open and familiar. Waves roll in steadily. Sea grass bends under the sun. The island appears peaceful, even ordinary, a place defined by quiet beaches and slow movement. But Topsail Island carries stories that run deeper than its shoreline. During times of war, this island was not just a place of rest. Operations were conducted quietly. Certain areas were restricted. Much of what happened here was never meant to be seen or remembered. That history never fully left. As the sun sets, the island begins to feel different. The light softens, and long shadows stretch across the dunes. The wind carries more weight. The island feels attentive, as though listening. When night fully arrives, Topsail Island reveals its most unsettling side. Visitors walking along the beach after dark sometimes notice strange lights moving across the sand. These lights are low and distant, drifting steadily near the shoreline. They move parallel to the water, stopping briefly before continuing on their path. The lights appear without warning and vanish just as suddenly. When people walk closer to investigate, the beach remains empty. No footprints. No equipment. No visible source. The darkness closes in again, leaving only the sound of waves and the lingering memory of movement. Some describe the lights as controlled, purposeful. They move with intent rather than randomness, as if following a route that exists only at night. Along with the lights, many report hearing footsteps near the shore. The sound is slow and rhythmic, matching the steady pace of walking boots on firm sand. The footsteps often move in groups, close together, following a straight line along the water's edge. The sound carries clearly in the night air. It does not stumble or drag. It maintains a consistent pattern, then fades into silence. When visitors look toward the source, the beach is empty, stretching in both directions with no sign of movement. These footsteps are not rushed. They feel deliberate, almost rehearsed. Those who hear them often stand still, listening closely, waiting for the sound to return. Sometimes it disappears entirely, leaving an unsettling stillness behind. The silence that follows feels heavier than before. Even the waves seem to pause, as though the island itself is holding its breath. Many believe these experiences are tied to the Islanda's wartime past. During those years, soldiers trained and moved along the beaches under cover of darkness. Patrols were conducted quietly. Lights were shielded. Footsteps followed strict routines designed to avoid detection. The island became a place where movement happened without sound, where presence was felt more than seen. Over time, that atmosphere may have settled into the land itself. The strange lights are often compared to signal lamps or shielded equipment, appearing briefly before disappearing. The marching footsteps echo drills and patrols repeated night after night, movements ingrained through repetition and discipline. Visitors often describe a feeling of closeness to the past while standing on Topsail Island at night. The boundary between now and then feels thin. The beach feels less like a place of leisure and more like a corridor, guiding unseen movement along familiar paths. Even those unaware of the island's history report a sense of unease after dark. The feeling does not come from fear, but from awareness. A sense that something once happened here that was never fully resolved. Standing still on the beach can feel uncomfortable. The island seems to respond to movement, acknowledging each step taken along the sand. Some visitors describe the feeling of being observed, not directly, but from the edges of perception. The longer one remains, the stronger the sensation becomes. Thoughts drift toward the past. Imagination fills gaps left by darkness. The island feels layered, carrying multiple moments at once. As dawn approaches, the atmosphere slowly loosens its grip. The strange lights no longer appear. The footsteps fade completely. The beach returns to its natural rhythm. Birds return to the shoreline. The horizon brightens. Morning light reveals nothing unusual. The sand is smooth and undisturbed. The water moves as it always has. Topsail Island looks peaceful once more, offering no evidence of the night before. To someone arriving in daylight, the idea of hidden movement and unseen patrols seems impossible. The island feels open and calm, shaped only by nature. But those who have walked its beaches after dark remember the difference. They remember the lights that moved without source. The footsteps that echoed without bodies. The silence that felt too deliberate to ignore. Topsail Island remains a place where history does not rest quietly. The past feels close here, woven into sand and wind, surfacing when the world grows still enough to notice. It does not announce itself loudly. It does not demand belief. It simply waits for night. When the island sheds its familiar face. And allows echoes of secrecy, movement, and memory to drift once more across the shore. The waves continue their endless motion. The beach stands unchanged. And beneath the calm surface of Topsail Island, the past remains present. Never fully buried, always just close enough to be felt. Figure 8 Island lies just off the coast, narrow and quiet, shaped by wind, sand, and the steady rhythm of the sea. By day, it feels secluded but peaceful, defined by private roads, tall dunes, and homes set back from the shore. There are no shops or crowds here, only the sound of waves and the distant call of birds. The island feels intentionally removed from the outside world, a place designed for privacy and calm. As the sun begins to lower, the character of the island subtly shifts. Light softens across the sand, and long shadows stretch between houses. Activity fades quickly. Windows darken. The stillness becomes more pronounced, settling over the island like a held breath. What once felt serene begins to feel watchful. Visitors often describe an overwhelming sense of unease after sunset. It does not arrive suddenly. Instead, it builds slowly, as if the island itself is changing pace. Walking along the quiet streets, people become more aware of their footsteps, the sound carrying farther than expected. Every movement feels amplified in the absence of noise. The homes on Figure 8 Island are spaced apart, separated by dunes and vegetation. At night, many appear empty, their lights turned off, their windows reflecting only darkness. It is in these spaces between houses that figures are sometimes seen standing still. The figures appear without warning. They stand upright, partially obscured by shadow, often just beyond the reach of streetlight or moon glow. Those who notice the figures often stop walking, unsure of what they are seeing. The sense of being observed grows stronger in these moments. The air feels heavier. Breathing becomes more noticeable. The island seems to narrow attention, focusing it entirely on the space ahead. When people attempt to approach, the figures vanish. They do not walk away or fade gradually. One moment they are there, the next they are gone. The space between the houses returns to emptiness, revealing nothing but sand, shadow, and stillness. No sound accompanies their disappearance. No footsteps retreat. No doors open or close. The figures leave no trace of having been present at all. This absence is often more unsettling than their appearance. Some visitors report seeing multiple figures at once, spaced evenly between homes, as if positioned deliberately. Others describe seeing only one, always at a distance, always just far enough away to remain indistinct. In every case, the result is the same. When attention is focused on them, they are gone. The unease that follows does not fade quickly. People describe a strong urge to leave the area, even if they cannot explain why. The island feels less welcoming, less neutral. It feels aware. This sensation is not tied to any specific location. The quiet that once felt peaceful now feels charged. As though something is waiting for night to deepen further. The ocean surrounding the island grows darker. After sunset, its movement more difficult to see but impossible to ignore. Waves break steadily, creating a constant low sound that fills the silence. The water feels close, encircling the land completely. The wind shifts often at night, moving through dunes and between houses with a low whisper. Some visitors report feeling watched even when they see no figures at all. The sensation comes from behind or from the side, never directly ahead. Turning offers no relief. The feeling remains until they leave the island or return indoors. Inside the homes, the quiet can feel just as heavy. Rooms seem larger at night. Sounds carry through hallways. Windows reflect darkness instead of light. Even indoors, the sense of unease does not always disappear. Many who experience these moments question their perception. The island is exclusive and well maintained. There is no obvious reason for fear. Yet the emotional response is strong and consistent. People feel unsettled without a clear cause. The history of Figure 8 Island is quieter than many places, but that quiet may be part of what gives it power. The island has long been defined by absence rather than presence. Few permanent residents. Little public access. Long stretches of land left undisturbed. This isolation creates space for imagination, memory, and impression to take root. Without constant activity to anchor perception, the mind becomes more sensitive to subtle changes in environment and mood. Shadows feel deeper. Silence feels louder. Some believe the figures are impressions rather than beings, echoes of movement shaped by isolation and expectation. Others believe the island holds something unresolved, something tied to the land itself rather than to any specific event. What remains consistent is the experience of not knowing where the figures go. There is no explanation that fits neatly. No logical path they take. No place they disappear into. They are simply absent the moment they are noticed. As night deepens, most visitors retreat indoors or leave the island entirely. The streets fall completely silent. The spaces between houses grow darker still. The figures are not seen again, but the feeling they leave behind remains. By morning, Figure 8 Island looks unchanged. Sunlight returns warmth to the sand. The unease lifts gradually. The homes appear welcoming again. The island resumes its quiet, private calm. Yet those who walked its streets after sunset remember the experience clearly. The sense of being watched. The figures standing where no one should be. The silence that followed their disappearance. Figure 8 Island does not announce its mystery. It does not display it openly. Instead, it reveals itself slowly, after dark, in the spaces between certainty and doubt. Quiet and private by design, the island holds on to its secrets without explanation. And for those who encounter them, the unanswered question remains. Who were the figures standing in the darkness? And where did they go? Ocracoke Bank stretches along the northern edge of the Outer Banks, a place where land thins into dunes, marsh, and wind-shaped grass. By day, it is remote and beautiful. The beach runs wide and pale, bordered by rolling dunes and tall grasses that bend easily under open sky. The ocean moves steadily, and the absence of crowds gives the area a quiet, untouched feeling. The remoteness feels intentional. There are few structures here, and the landscape appears largely unchanged by time. Paths are faint, shaped more by wind and water than by footsteps. Visitors often describe a sense of freedom during daylight hours, as if the world has grown larger and less demanding. The silence feels clean and restorative. The sun lowers behind the dunes, casting long shadows across the grasses. The light softens, and colors fade into muted tones of gray and blue. The wind grows cooler, moving steadily off the water and through the vegetation. Sounds carry farther now, traveling across open sand without obstruction. Night falls, and the darkness arrives quickly, unbroken by artificial light. Stars stretch wide overhead, and the horizon becomes difficult to separate from the sea. The tall grasses begin to move differently, swaying in uneven patterns that feel less predictable than during the day. At night, shadows move through the grasses. They slide low and slow, rising and falling with the wind but not always matching its rhythm. The shapes are indistinct, forming briefly before dissolving again. Some appear to move against the direction of the breeze, crossing patches of sand where no one stands. Those who watch closely often feel uncertain of what they are seeing. The shadows never fully separate from the grasses. They blend, shift, and reappear farther away. When attention is focused directly on them, they thin and fade, leaving behind only the sound of wind and surf. Whispers drift across the dunes, carried lightly on the wind. The sound is soft and broken, rising and falling in fragments rather than full speech. Words are difficult to identify, but the tone is unmistakable. It feels cautionary, as though offering warnings meant to be heard but not fully understood. The whispers do not come from a single direction. They move with the wind, circling and slipping past rather than approaching directly. Those who listen often turn slowly, trying to locate the source, but the sound shifts before it can be pinned down. Some hear the whispers grow closer near the dunes. The grasses rustle, and the wind presses in tighter, brushing against skin and clothing. When people stop walking, the whispers fade, replaced by the low roar of distant waves. The experience feels personal. Though the words remain unclear, the message feels directed. Visitors describe a strong instinct to leave the area, not out of panic, but out of a sense that they are not meant to remain. The feeling builds quietly, settling into the chest and tightening with each passing minute. Ocracoke Banks has long been shaped by isolation. The land here has always existed at the edge of navigation and settlement. Storms have rearranged dunes overnight. Channels have opened and closed without warning. Those unfamiliar with the area once found themselves lost easily, guided only by stars, wind, and instinct. Some believe the warnings heard at night reflect that history. Voices shaped by survival, urging caution in a landscape that offers little forgiveness after dark. The land does not threaten openly. It advises, quietly and persistently, through sound and movement rather than force. The shadows in the grasses add to the unease. They seem to move with intention, following paths invisible in daylight. Some observers describe the sense that these shapes are aware of being watched, adjusting position when attention shifts. Others feel the shadows are not separate entities, but expressions of the land itself responding to presence. Time behaves strangely here at night. Minutes feel longer. Distance becomes harder to judge. Familiar landmarks disappear into darkness. And the dunes take on new shapes that feel unfamiliar. Even experienced visitors describe moments of disorientation. They are unsure how long they have been walking or how far they have gone. The wind plays a constant role. It carries sound and movement across open space, blending whispers with the natural noise of the environment. At times, it feels as though the wind itself is speaking, shaping breath and sound into something almost deliberate. The shadows do not rush forward. The voices do not shout. Everything unfolds slowly, as if giving time to decide. The land seems to offer warnings rather than threats, guiding those who listen toward retreat. Many choose to leave sooner than planned. They walk back toward familiar paths with a growing sense of urgency, glancing behind them even when nothing follows. As distance increases, the whispers soften and the shadows retreat into stillness. The wind returns to its ordinary sound. Relief comes gradually. Breathing steadies. Awareness widens. The feeling of being watched loosens its hold. Even after leaving the area, many describe lingering unease that stays with them. Sleep feels lighter that night. Dreams are vivid and unsettled. The sound of wind returns unexpectedly, carrying fragments of whisper that vanish upon waking. For some, the feeling lasts for days, a quiet reminder of something encountered but not fully understood. By morning, Ocracoke Banks looks unchanged. Sunlight reveals dunes and grasses as they were before. Shadows behave normally again. The wind feels familiar and harmless. To someone arriving fresh, the landscape appears peaceful and untouched. Yet those who stood here after dark know there is more beneath the surface. They remember the moving shadows in the grasses. The voices whispering warnings on the wind. The subtle pressure that urged departure without explanation. Ocracoke Banks remains remote and beautiful. It offers openness, silence, and raw nature to those who visit. But when night falls and the wind moves through tall grass, the land speaks in quieter ways. Shadows may rise and drift. Voices may whisper caution. And many who experience it will leave feeling unsettled for days afterward, carrying the memory of a place that does not reveal itself all at once, but instead waits for darkness to share its deeper presence. Bear Island lies apart from the mainland, separated by open water and a sense of distance that grows stronger with every passing minute of the journey. Accessible only by boat, the island does not reveal itself easily. Approaching the island feels like crossing a boundary. The sound of the engine fades, replaced by wind and water. Once ashore, the quiet is immediate and profound. There are no roads, no buildings, no signs of recent habitation. The land feels untouched, shaped only by tide, weather, and time. The isolation here is intense, pressing in from every direction. During the day, Bear Island feels calm but distant. The beach stretches wide and empty, bordered by dense vegetation that blocks views inland. The ocean surrounds everything, creating a natural barrier that makes the island feel smaller and more enclosed than it appears on a map. As the sun lowers, the atmosphere begins to change. Shadows lengthen across the sand, and the water darkens into deep shades of blue and gray. The horizon softens, blending sky and sea into a single line. Sounds carry farther here, drifting easily across the open space. Even small movements feel amplified in the growing quiet. It is often after dusk that visitors report the first unsettling experiences. From across the water, faint crying can sometimes be heard. The sound is soft and distant, carried by the breeze in uneven waves. The crying rises and falls, never quite reaching clarity, yet unmistakably emotional. Those who hear it often pause, listening carefully, trying to determine its source. The crying does not come from the island itself. It seems to travel across the water, echoing from somewhere beyond sight. No boats are visible. No other islands are close enough to explain it. Listening closely does not bring answers. The sound never sharpens into words. The sound never sharpens into words. It remains distant and mournful, suspended between water and air. The effect is deeply unsettling, not because of volume, but because of how out of place it feels in such an empty environment. Along the beach, lights are sometimes seen flickering briefly in the distance. They appear low to the ground, small points of illumination that glow softly for a moment before vanishing. The lights do not move like flashlights or navigation markers. They blink on and off without pattern, leaving the darkness unchanged when they disappear. Those who see the lights often assume someone else has arrived on the island. Walking toward the source brings no result. The beach remains empty, the sand undisturbed, the vegetation still. The lights do not reappear when searched for directly. These brief flashes are often reported near the waterline, where waves meet sand. They do not reflect on the surface of the water. They simply exist for a moment, then are gone, leaving behind only uncertainty. The isolation of Bear Island intensifies these experiences. With no nearby structures, no artificial light, and no constant background noise, the senses become heightened. Every sound feels significant. Every shadow draws attention. The mind struggles to find familiar reference points. Standing alone on the beach after dark can feel overwhelming. The ocean surrounds the island completely, its steady movement creating a sense of being enclosed rather than open. The water reflects faint light from the sky, making it difficult to judge distance or depth. In this setting, the crying carried across the water feels closer than it should. The lights feel deliberate rather than random. The silence between these moments becomes heavy, as though the island itself is waiting. Locals familiar with Bear Island speak of it with caution. Stories are shared quietly, often without detail. Many avoid visiting at night, choosing to leave before the last light fades. Those who stay describe an unease that builds steadily, not through fear, but through sustained awareness. The history of Bear Island is sparse, marked more by absence than by recorded events. It has long remained uninhabited, used occasionally and briefly, but never settled. The lack of human presence feels significant, as though the island resists permanence. Some believe the sounds and lights are natural phenomena. Wind can carry sound across water in unexpected ways. Distant vessels or shorelines can create illusions. Bioluminescence or reflections can appear briefly and vanish. These explanations offer logic, yet they do not fully account for the emotional impact of the experiences. Some believe the sounds and lights are natural phenomena. Wind can carry sound across water in unexpected ways. Visitors with no prior knowledge report the same details. The crying that drifts across the water. The lights that flicker and disappear. The overwhelming sense of isolation that makes each moment feel stretched and exposed. Remaining on Bear Island for extended periods can feel draining. The absence of distraction forces attention inward. Thoughts grow louder. Sensations feel sharper. The island does not offer comfort or reassurance. It simply exists, quiet and watchful. Leaving the island brings immediate relief. The engine noise returns. The water feels less enclosing. The lights and sounds do not follow. Looking back, the island appears unchanged. A dark shape against the horizon. Giving no hint of the experiences just felt. Yet the memory lingers. The sound of crying carried across empty water. The lights that appeared only long enough to be noticed. The feeling of being completely alone in a place that felt aware of that solitude. Bear Island remains isolated, accessible only by boat, separated from the mainland by more than distance. It exists as a space where sound and light behave differently, where silence feels active rather than empty. Where sound and light behave differently, where silence feels active rather than empty. For those who visit, the island offers no clear explanation, only an experience shaped by isolation and subtle interruption. It does not demand belief or interpretation. It simply leaves an impression. On Bear Island, the water carries sound farther than expected, the darkness hides brief points of light. The darkness hides brief points of light, and the silence presses in from every side. It is a place where the absence of people feels as strong as a presence. And where leaving brings relief, but never complete forgetting. The island remains behind, quiet and unchanged, waiting across the water. Leah Island sits apart from the familiar routes, a narrow stretch of sand and grass that rarely draws attention. Reaching it requires effort and intention, and few choose to make the trip. There are no structures, no marked paths, and no signs of regular human activity. From a distance, the island looks quiet and empty, resting low against the water as if trying not to be noticed. Stepping onto Leah Island feels different from the start. The sand is firm but cool, even under warm sunlight. Wind moves across the surface in uneven bursts, bending the grasses and then falling still without warning. The silence is broad and heavy, broken only by distant waves and the occasional call of a bird. The island does not feel welcoming. It feels alert. Walking along the shoreline, visitors often notice how exposed the place feels. There is little elevation, nowhere to gain a wide view. Every footstep sounds too loud, sinking into sand that holds its shape longer than expected. The island gives the impression of watching, though nothing moves. As time passes, the quiet begins to shift. People report hearing splashing sounds coming from the water nearby. The noise is clear and distinct, like something entering or moving just beneath the surface. The splashing repeats, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away. The sound suggests weight and motion, yet the water remains undisturbed. Those who listen closely often feel a tightening in the chest, a growing unease sparked by the mismatch between sound and sight. Alongside the unexplained splashing, sudden cold air rises from the sand. The temperature drops sharply, as if the ground itself is releasing stored chill. The cold moves upward in waves, brushing against legs and hands before fading. It feels intentional, targeted, rather than a natural shift in weather. One moment the air is warm and still, the next it is biting and dense. Breath becomes visible briefly, even on mild days. The sensation passes quickly, leaving behind goosebumps and a lingering discomfort that does not fully fade. The combination of sound and cold begins to wear on those who remain. The island feels less empty and more crowded with something unseen. Space feels compressed. Movement feels watched. Even standing still brings the sensation of being observed from multiple directions. Some visitors report the cold air appearing immediately after the splashing sounds. Others experience it first, followed by the noise moments later. There is no clear sequence, only the understanding that the two sensations are connected. The island seems to respond to presence, acknowledging each step with subtle pressure. As daylight wanes, Leah Island grows darker in tone. Shadows deepen around the grasses and along the waterline. The sky takes on muted colors. The surface of the water reflects less light. The splashing sounds become more frequent though still inconsistent. Each occurrence pulls attention outward toward the empty water. Looking inland offers little comfort. The interior of the island feels closed off despite the lack of trees or structures. The grasses rustle softly but the sound does not match the movement of the wind. Paths seem to form and disappear, guiding footsteps without explanation. The island begins to feel forgotten, not abandoned in a peaceful way, but left behind with resentment. A tension in the air, a sense that something here has been ignored for too long. The cold bursts feel sharper. The splashing sounds feel closer. The silence between them feels charged. Those who linger often describe a rising irritation or unease that does not feel like their own. Emotions seem heightened without cause. Small sounds trigger sudden alertness. The urge to leave grows stronger with each passing minute, not as panic, but as insistence. The water surrounding Leah Island plays a role in the experience. It reflects sound oddly, carrying splashes and echoes across wide distances. A noise from one side of the island can feel close enough to touch, while movement nearby disappears entirely. The boundary between land and water feels unstable. Some believe the island holds memories of struggle, moments when nature asserted itself violently. Storms, floods, and shifting tides may have shaped the land repeatedly, erasing and reforming it over time. The island feels like a place that has been forced to endure, reshaped without consent. Others suggest the isolation itself creates the sensation. Rarely visited places carry a different weight. Without frequent human presence, sound and space behave differently. Awareness sharpens. The mind becomes alert to every change. Yet those who experience Leah Island insist the reactions feel external, not imagined. The anger attributed to the island is not explosive. It is restrained, simmering beneath the surface. The cold air does not freeze. The splashing does not reveal itself. Everything remains controlled, measured, as if the island is choosing how much to show. As darkness approaches fully, the pressure becomes undeniable. The island feels hostile, not through action, but through atmosphere. Staying feels intrusive. Each step feels like a challenge. The water sounds grow irregular, and the cold rises more frequently, brushing past with increasing force. Leaving the island brings immediate relief. The cold does not follow. The splashing fades into ordinary wave sounds. Looking back, the island appears unchanged, quiet and still, as if nothing unusual occurred. Yet the experience lingers. Visitors recall the exact sound of water moving without motion. They remember the sudden chill rising from the sand. The feeling of being unwelcome returns in memory, sharp and specific. Sleep after visiting Leah Island often comes in fragments. Dreams feature dark water, unseen movement, and sudden cold. Waking brings the sensation that something unfinished remains behind. That the island noticed the departure. By morning, Leah Island looks calm once more. Sunlight rests on the sand. The water glitters gently. The grasses sway peacefully. It becomes tempting to dismiss the experience as imagination shaped by isolation. But those who stood there know the difference. The island felt alive, not in a nurturing way, but in an aware one. It responded to presence with sound and sensation, reminding visitors that it is not simply empty land. Leah Island remains rarely visited, left mostly to wind and tide. It does not invite exploration or offer comfort. It exists on its own terms, holding onto whatever history shaped it. When people step onto its sand and linger too long, the island answers. Water splashes without movement. Cold air rises without cause. And beneath it all, a quiet anger simmers, making it clear that this place does not wish to be remembered, only left alone. Oak Island sits quietly in the North Atlantic, a small stretch of land wrapped in fog, rock, and endless questions. By day, it appears unassuming. Trees lean toward the shore. Yet beneath that calm surface lies a reputation built on mystery, obsession, and relentless searching. For generations, Oak Island has drawn people who believed something valuable was hidden deep below its soil. Treasure hunters arrived with maps and theories, convinced that secrets waited beneath their feet. Some stayed for years. Others returned again and again, unable to let go of the promise that something extraordinary remained just out of reach. That obsession left a mark. As daylight fades, the island begins to feel different. The air grows cooler, heavier, as mist rolls in from the water. Shadows stretch across the ground, and familiar landmarks soften into shapes that feel uncertain. The island seems to pull inward, guarding itself from the outside world. Night on Oak Island is where the stories begin. Visitors who remain after dark sometimes report seeing figures near the shoreline, bent low to the ground, moving with deliberate purpose. They appear to be digging, their motions slow and repetitive, as though continuing work long abandoned. They never look up. They never acknowledge those watching. They exist only briefly, then fade into darkness. As if absorbed by the land itself. These figures are often seen in areas long associated with searches. Places where earth was turned again and again, where tools struck stone, where hope rose and fell in cycles. When people move closer, the figures vanish. The ground shows no disturbance. The soil remains smooth and undisturbed, as though no one touched it at all. Along with the figures, voices are sometimes heard drifting through the night air. Low and tense, they sound like arguments carried by the wind. The voices rise and fall, overlapping and urgent, yet never clear enough to understand. They feel close, as though the speakers are just beyond sight, hidden by darkness and brush. The quiet that follows feels thick and uncomfortable, pressing in from all sides. Even the sound of waves seems muted, as though the island itself is listening. Some believe these voices belong to those who searched here long ago. Men consumed by the promise of discovery. Partners who disagreed on methods, on meaning, on when to stop. Obsession can sharpen conflict, and Oak Island has seen more than its share of broken resolve and unanswered questions. Others believe the voices come from something older. The idea persists that Oak Island is guarded. That whatever lies buried beneath its surface is protected by forces that do not wish to be uncovered. Restless spirits, bound to the land by purpose rather than anger, are said to watch over the island, ensuring that its secrets remain hidden. The atmosphere at night supports this belief. Sounds carry oddly. Footsteps seem louder than they should. Standing still can feel uncomfortable, as though remaining in one place draws attention. Some visitors describe the sensation of being watched from below the ground, not from the trees or shoreline, but from deep beneath the surface. The feeling is subtle, but persistent, creating the impression that the island itself is aware of those who walk upon it. The shoreline becomes especially unsettling after dark. Waves move in steady patterns, reflecting moonlight in broken lines. The water feels deeper here, more opaque. Looking out toward the sea can feel disorienting, as though distance loses meaning in the darkness. The feeling is subtle, but persistent, creating the impression that the island itself is aware of those who walk upon it. Those who linger too long often report exhaustion, both physical and mental. The island seems to drain energy quietly, leaving visitors restless and uneasy. Sleep comes lightly, filled with vivid dreams of digging, searching, and never quite reaching the goal. The history of Oak Island is filled with unanswered questions. Each generation added new theories, new tools, new determination. Yet the island has resisted every attempt to fully reveal its secrets. Excavations flooded. Tunnels collapsed. Promising discoveries led only to more questions. Some believe the repeated failures are coincidence. Others believe they are warnings. The figures seen digging at night are often described as tireless. They do not pause. They do not look up. They continue their work endlessly, as though trapped in a cycle they cannot escape. The voices arguing in the darkness reflect the same tension, the same inability to agree or move forward. Oak Island feels like a place where effort never truly ends. Where searching becomes its own purpose, detached from success or failure. As dawn approaches, the island slowly releases its grip. Mist lifts. Shadows retreat. The shoreline looks ordinary again. No figures remain. No voices linger. The ground shows no sign of disturbance. Morning light reveals a quiet island resting beneath open sky. To someone arriving fresh, Oak Island appears peaceful, almost gentle. There is no obvious sign of obsession or unrest. Yet those who experienced the night know the difference. They remember the figures digging where no one stood. The voices arguing without speakers. The sense that something beneath the island was aware, waiting, guarding. Oak Island remains a symbol of mystery not because of what has been found, but because of what has not. The land feels patient, as though it has all the time it needs. Some believe the island will never give up its secrets. That the restless spirits seen at night are not meant to frighten, but to remind. Not every mystery is meant to be solved. Not every treasure is meant to be uncovered. Oak Island stands quietly, wrapped in fog and questions, allowing curiosity to circle endlessly around it. By day, it invites wonder. By night, it reveals the cost of obsession. And deep below, whatever lies buried remains untouched, guarded by memory, persistence, and the restless presence of those who searched too long and never truly left. Bird Island rests just offshore, a narrow stretch of sand shaped by wind, tide, and time. By day, it feels gentle and inviting. The beach curves softly, the water shimmers under open sky, and seabirds gather along the shoreline. Footprints crisscross the sand, and the island seems to welcome anyone willing to cross the shallow water to reach it. In sunlight, the place feels calm and uncomplicated. The island has no permanent structures. There are no roads, no lights, no signs of modern life beyond what visitors bring with them. This openness gives Bird Island its peaceful character. Waves roll in steadily. The wind carries salt and the sound of distant surf. Everything feels natural and unhurried. As the sun lowers, the island begins to change. The brightness softens, and the colors of sand and water deepen. Shadows stretch across the beach, and the birds gradually depart. The sounds of the day fade one by one until only the ocean remains. What was once comforting quiet begins to feel heavier. After sunset, Bird Island becomes profoundly still. The absence of artificial light allows darkness to settle completely. The horizon disappears. The shoreline blends into the night. The sound of waves grows louder in contrast to the silence around it, filling the air with a steady rhythm that feels endless. Visitors who remain after dark often describe the silence as oppressive. It is not simply quiet. It presses inward, making every breath and movement feel exposed. Without visual landmarks, distance becomes difficult to judge. The island feels larger, less familiar, as though it has expanded beyond its daytime boundaries. Walking along the beach at night requires attention. The sand shifts underfoot, and the waterline is harder to see. footsteps sound sharper, each step distinct against the otherwise empty soundscape. The ocean provides no variation, only its constant motion. It is during these nighttime walks that some visitors report hearing footsteps following behind them. The sound is clear and unmistakable. Sand compressing under weight. A steady pace that matches their own. The steps remain just far enough back to avoid collision, close enough to be felt. At first, many assume another visitor is nearby. Bird Island is open and unguarded, and people often explore it freely. But when they slow their pace, the footsteps slow as well. When they stop completely, the footsteps continue for a moment, then pause. Turning around reveals only darkness. The beach stretches empty in both directions. No silhouette stands against the horizon. No movement breaks the stillness. The water reflects faint starlight, but the sand behind remains undisturbed. When walking resumes, the footsteps return. They do not approach. They do not retreat. They simply follow, maintaining a constant distance. The sound blends with the ocean's rhythm, making it difficult to tell where one ends and the other begins. The island offers nowhere to hide and nowhere to focus attention. Without trees or structures, the beach becomes an open stage. The sense of being alone fades, replaced by the certainty that something else is present. Some visitors quicken their pace, hoping to reach the water crossing before the tide changes. Even then, the footsteps remain steady, never gaining or falling behind. Others stop again, calling out into the darkness, expecting a response. None comes. The silence that follows feels intentional. It stretches longer than expected, pressing down until even the sound of the waves feels distant. In these moments, the island feels watchful, as though it is aware of every movement. There are reports of the footsteps circling slightly, shifting position without ever revealing a source. The sound may move from directly behind to slightly off to one side, always staying just beyond sight. The sand shows no extra footprints, no sign of another presence. Fear does not always arrive immediately. Some describe the experience as confusion at first, followed by unease that builds slowly. The realization that there is no explanation for the sound creates tension that does not release easily. The natural isolation of Bird Island amplifies these sensations. Without lights or buildings, the night strips away familiar reference points. The darkness feels complete, leaving visitors with only sound and instinct to guide them. Those who experience this often describe a strong urge to leave the island as quickly as possible. The crossing back feels longer at night, the water colder, the distance harder to judge. The footsteps usually fade as the shoreline of the mainland comes into view. Once back on solid ground, the sense of being followed disappears. The air feels lighter. The silence loses its weight. Looking back toward the island reveals nothing unusual, only a dark shape against the water. By morning, Bird Island returns to its peaceful state. Sunlight reveals smooth sand and bird tracks near the waterline. There is no evidence of anything unusual. The beach looks exactly as it did before nightfall. Those who experienced the island after dark often struggle to explain what happened. The absence of proof makes the memory feel fragile, yet the emotional impact remains strong. The sound of footsteps following in total darkness is not easily forgotten. The island itself offers no answers. It does not change or react. It simply exists, shaped by natural forces and cycles of light and tide. Whatever causes the nighttime experiences leaves no trace behind. Some believe the footsteps are echoes of past visitors, impressions left in the sand and air. Others think the island's isolation allows the mind to amplify sound and sensation. Still, the consistency of reports suggests something more difficult to dismiss. What remains clear is the contrast between day and night. Bird Island feels gentle and open under the sun, but at night it becomes something else entirely. The silence grows heavy. The darkness deepens. The beach feels less like a place and more like an experience. For those who walk its shoreline after sunset and hear footsteps that never reveal themselves, the island leaves a lasting impression. Not of danger, but of presence. Bird Island does not announce itself. It does not chase or confront. It simply allows the night to change how it is felt. And when visitors turn around in the darkness, expecting to see someone there, they find only empty sand, endless water, and the quiet certainty that they were not as alone as they believed. Sunset Beach Island lies where the coast softens and the horizon stretches wide, a place known for calm evenings and glowing skies. By day, the island feels gentle and inviting. The sand is pale and warm, the water shallow and clear near the shore. Families walk the beach, shells scatter along the tide line, and the name feels perfectly suited to the peaceful scenery. As the sun lowers, the island lives up to its reputation. Orange and pink light spills across the water, and the shoreline glows softly. Waves move in slow rhythm, and the air cools just enough to feel refreshing. Visitors often linger to watch the final moments of daylight, reluctant to leave such a tranquil view. But once darkness settles, the name begins to feel misleading. Night arrives quietly on Sunset Beach Island, without sharp contrast or warning. The sky deepens, stars emerge, and the last warmth fades from the sand. The beach empties, footsteps thinning until only a few remain. The ocean darkens into a wide, moving shadow that feels closer than before. Sounds carry farther across the water, and the surf grows louder, its rhythm less soothing and more insistent. The shallow water near the beach reflects little light, turning into a mirror of darkness broken only by foam. It is during these hours that visitors report seeing shadows standing in the water. The shapes appear just beyond the shoreline, where waves reach ankle or knee depth. They rise slowly, darker than the surrounding water, holding still as the surf moves around them. They resemble human forms in outline only, lacking detail or movement. They do not walk or approach. They stand facing the shore, unmoving, as if watching. Waves pass through them without resistance, breaking against invisible legs and reforming beyond. The shapes remain steady even as water shifts around them. Those who notice the shadows often stop without realizing it. The instinct to move forward or back disappears, replaced by a deep stillness. They do not react to attention. They do not fade immediately. They simply remain, present and silent. Whispers drift from the surf soon after. The sound rises with the waves, soft and indistinct. But as listening sharpens, the tone becomes clearer. The words are never fully clear. They come in fragments, carried on foam and retreating water. The sound seems to circle, moving left and right along the shoreline rather than coming from a single point. Those who listen closely often feel a chill spread across their skin. The whispers do not grow louder when approached. Instead, they thin and stretch, becoming harder to grasp. When people step closer to the water, the sound shifts farther out, staying just beyond reach. The shadows in the water remain during this time. They do not multiply or disappear quickly. They hold their positions, patient and steady. Some observers report that the shapes seem closer after blinking or looking away briefly, though distance remains difficult to judge in the dark. The vastness of the ocean presses inward, and the space behind the shoreline feels watched as well. Despite the unease, there is no sudden threat. The shadows do not rush forward. The whispers do not shout. Everything unfolds slowly, restrained by an invisible boundary. The experience feels less like danger and more like intrusion, as though the island is revealing something not meant for long observation. Many refuse to stay past nightfall after experiencing this. They step back from the water, hearts beating faster than expected. As distance grows, the whispers fade into ordinary surf, and the shadows thin until they blend back into darkness. The sense of being observed loosens its hold gradually rather than all at once. Sunset Beach Island has a long relationship with the sea. Generations have crossed these waters, fished these shores, and trusted the shallow tides near land. Yet the ocean here has also carried loss, storms, and moments that never return to shore. The calm surface hides depth and movement that never fully rest. Some believe the shadows are reflections of that history. Not spirits in the usual sense, but impressions left behind by repeated moments of waiting, watching, and longing. Figures standing where water meets land, caught between movement and stillness. The whispers may carry similar weight. The sea holds sound differently at night, bending it across waves and distance. Yet the emotional quality of the whispers feels deliberate, as though shaped by memory rather than chance. Others attribute the experience to natural conditions. Low light, moving water, and fatigue can shape perception. But these explanations do not fully account for how consistently the shadows are reported, or how strongly the experience affects those who witness it. The effect often lingers. Even after leaving the beach, visitors describe heightened awareness, as if the ocean followed them inland. The sound of waves returns unexpectedly in quiet moments. The image of figures standing in water reappears when looking at dark reflections. By morning, Sunset Beach Island looks unchanged. Sunlight reveals shallow water and smooth sand. The surf feels gentle again. There are no marks in the water, no shadows standing where waves roll in. The island returns to its familiar calm, welcoming and serene. Yet those who stayed after dark see it differently. The beauty remains, but it carries depth and caution. The name feels incomplete, missing the part revealed only at night. The island becomes a place of contrast, gentle by day and unsettling by night. Sunset Beach Island does not announce its darker side. It does not warn visitors away. It waits until light fades and sound softens. Then, quietly, shadows may stand in shallow water. Whispers may drift from the surf. The shoreline may feel watched. Many choose to leave before night fully settles. They pack up as the last light fades, guided by instinct rather than reason. Those who remain carry the memory with them, a quiet understanding that some places change when the sun goes down. The name Sunset Beach Island promises beauty. After dark, it offers something else. A reminder that calm surfaces can hide deeper stories, and that the ocean, even when shallow and quiet, remembers far more than it reveals. Knott's Island lies apart from familiar routes, surrounded by water and quiet that seems to stretch endlessly in every direction. Reaching it requires intention and patience, and once arrived, the sense of separation is immediate. The island feels removed from ordinary time, shaped more by tide and weather than by human presence. Isolation defines the landscape, and silence settles quickly. By day, Knott's Island appears calm and restrained. Open land extends toward the shoreline, broken only by patches of vegetation and narrow paths worn faintly into the ground. Narrow paths worn faintly into the ground. There are no active towns, no clusters of homes, no signs of daily life. There are no active towns, no clusters of homes, no signs of daily life. What once existed here has faded, leaving behind only traces that are easy to miss if not carefully observed. The absence of buildings is striking. Where houses once stood, there is now open space. Foundations are gone. Roads lead nowhere. As evening approaches, the island grows quieter still. The sound of wind over grass and distant water becomes more pronounced. With no traffic or artificial noise, every movement feels amplified. The horizon darkens slowly, and the separation between land and sky blurs into soft shadows. It is during these hours that many visitors begin to feel uneasy, unable to explain why. After sunset, the stillness deepens. People walking along the island path sometimes hear knocking sounds nearby. The noise is clear and rhythmic, like knuckles striking wood. It comes from close range, often just off the path, as though someone is standing beside a door. There are no doors. No houses remain where the knocking is heard. Turning toward the sound reveals only open ground and darkness. There is no structure that could produce the noise. No loose material. No wind strong enough to explain it. The land remains still, offering no clue as to the source. The knocking does not feel random. It carries intention, as though someone is expecting an answer. Standing still does not make it return. Moving away sometimes does. The sound follows at a distance, then disappears completely, leaving behind a silence that feels heavier than before. Lights glowing faintly in the distance are another common report. Small points of illumination appear far across the island, low to the ground and steady. They resemble windows lit from within, soft and warm against the dark landscape. The lights remain visible for several seconds, long enough to draw attention and invite curiosity. Walking toward them brings no clarity. As distance closes, the lights begin to fade, growing dimmer until they vanish entirely. Reaching the area where they appeared reveals nothing but open land. No structures. No equipment. No reflective surfaces capable of holding light. The darkness returns untouched. These lights do not flicker like passing vehicles or moving boats. They do not drift or sway. They simply appear, glow briefly, and then are gone. Searching for them directly rarely brings success. They seem to exist only when observed indirectly. Throughout these experiences, one sensation remains constant. The feeling of being watched never fades. It does not arrive suddenly. It builds slowly, settling into awareness rather than triggering alarm. The sensation feels evenly distributed, not focused from a single direction. It is as though the island itself is aware of presence, observing quietly without revealing itself. Standing still intensifies this feeling. Moving forward does not lessen it. The awareness remains steady, calm, and persistent. This sensation does not resemble fear in its early stages. It feels more like attention. The kind that lingers without judgment or urgency. Locals familiar with Knott's Island speak of it carefully. Stories are shared quietly, often without detail. Many acknowledge the strange sounds and lights but avoid speculation. Some say the island feels different at night, as though it changes character when darkness settles. The history of Knott's Island is marked by gradual departure rather than sudden loss. People lived here once. Doors opened and closed. Lights burned in windows. Knocks on doors meant visitors or neighbors. Over time, those routines ended, but the land remained. Some believe the knocking sounds are echoes of those routines, impressions left behind by repetition. The lights may reflect memories of homes long gone, resurfacing briefly when conditions are right. The feeling of being watched may be the result of absence itself, drawing attention through what is no longer there. Skeptics offer practical explanations. Sound can travel unexpectedly over open land. Distant lights from boats or mainland structures can appear closer than they are. The mind, alert in unfamiliar darkness, can heighten perception. Visitors with no prior knowledge describe the same details. Knocking where no doors exist. Lights with no source. A persistent sense of observation that does not fade until leaving. Remaining on Knott's Island after dark can feel draining. The silence presses inward. The absence of activity removes distraction. Every sound and sensation feels significant. Even confident individuals describe an urge to leave, driven not by panic, but by prolonged discomfort. Leaving the island brings immediate relief. The feeling of being watched diminishes with distance. The knocking does not follow. The lights do not reappear. The water between island and mainland feels like a barrier restoring normal boundaries. Looking back, Knott's Island appears unchanged. Dark, quiet, and still. There is no visible sign of the experiences it produces. No movement. No light. No sound. Yet the memory remains vivid. The knock that came from nowhere. The lights that glowed without source. The awareness that never faded while on the island. The knock that came from nowhere. The lights that glowed without source. The lights that glowed without source. The awareness that never faded while on the island. The awareness that never faded while on the island. These impressions linger, resurfacing unexpectedly in quiet moments elsewhere. These impressions linger, resurfacing unexpectedly in quiet moments elsewhere. Knott's Island does not rely on dramatic displays or visible figures. Its unease comes from subtle interruption and absence. Sound where none should exist. Light without origin. Sound where none should exist. Light without origin. Light without origin. Attention without observer. Attention without observer. Isolated and quiet, the island holds its space carefully. It does not invite explanation or offer answers. It simply exists, leaving visitors to confront the discomfort of being noticed in a place where nothing should be watching. On Knott's Island, silence is not empty. It is occupied by memory, by expectation, and by the persistent feeling that the land remembers those who once lived there. The island remains behind, quiet and unchanged, waiting across the water, carrying its subtle disturbances into the night. Cape Lookout Barrier Island stretches far into the Atlantic. A narrow strip of sand and grass exposed to wind, tide, and sky. There are no towns here, no busy roads, only open beach, rolling dunes, and the steady presence of the lighthouse rising above it all. The island feels distant from the rest of the world, as though it exists on the edge of something larger and older than memory. By day, the island appears calm and expansive. Sunlight reflects off pale sand and shallow water. Visitors walk freely, yet comforted by the openness of the space. As the afternoon fades, the island begins to feel different. Shadows stretch longer across the dunes, and the light grows softer, less certain. The ocean darkens in tone, and the wind sharpens, carrying sound farther than before. The lighthouse becomes more prominent as daylight retreats, its presence commanding attention. After sunset, Cape Lookout feels exposed in a way that is difficult to describe. The waves that once rolled gently now seem louder, closer, their crash echoing with unusual force. The sky presses close. The sound of the ocean grows unnaturally loud at night. Each wave feels amplified, as though the water is surging with greater intensity than before. The rhythm becomes overwhelming, filling the air and leaving little room for thought. Visitors often pause, unsettled by how completely the sound surrounds them. It is during these hours that people report seeing figures near the lighthouse. From a distance, shapes appear against the sand, pale and indistinct. At first, the shapes seem easy to dismiss. Yet those who watch carefully notice the figures remain even as clouds pass or the angle of light changes. Their outlines persist, faint but unmistakable. When visitors approach, the figures do not react. There is no turning of heads, no acknowledgement of being seen. The stillness feels deliberate, almost formal. The closer one moves, the more fragile the shapes appear, as if they are made of mist rather than substance. Within moments, the figures fade. They dissolve into the night air, leaving nothing behind but empty sand and the constant roar of waves. No footprints remain. No disturbance marks where they stood. The lighthouse looms quietly above, unchanged. The disappearance often coincides with a sudden shift in atmosphere. The wind picks up sharply, and the sound of the ocean surges even louder. Waves crash with force that feels out of proportion to the conditions. The noise becomes oppressive, pressing in from all sides. The feeling arrives without warning, a sharp spike of fear that does not feel connected to any clear threat. Hearts race. Breathing quickens. The urge to flee becomes overwhelming, as though staying in place is no longer an option. Some visitors experience sudden panic during these moments. This reaction is intense but brief. Those affected often struggle to explain it afterward. There is no visible danger. The beach remains open and clear. Yet the instinct to leave feels urgent and absolute, driven by something deeper than reason. Walking away from the lighthouse, toward boats or shelter, brings gradual relief. The wind softens. The island releases its grip as suddenly as it tightened it. Not everyone experiences the panic in the same way. Some feel only unease, a persistent discomfort that grows with each passing minute. Others feel watched, as though the figures that vanished have not truly left. The lighthouse becomes a focal point, drawing attention even when it is no longer visible. Cape Lookout Barrier Island has long been shaped by isolation and danger. The waters surrounding it are known for shifting currents and sudden storms. Ships once relied on the lighthouse to guide them safely past treacherous shoals. Not every journey succeeded. The sea claimed its share of travelers, leaving stories scattered along the coast. The figures seen near the lighthouse may be tied to that history. Standing where guidance once mattered most. Watching the sea rather than the land. Their stillness suggests waiting, not wandering. They appear only briefly, as if surfacing from memory before returning to the water and wind. The overwhelming sound of waves at night adds to the sense that the island itself is responding. The ocean feels closer, more insistent, as though asserting its presence. The boundary between land and sea becomes less certain, blurring into a single, restless force. What makes Cape Lookout especially unsettling is the lack of control visitors feel. No way to predict when the figures will appear. Or when panic will strike. Then fades. Those who remain after dark often keep their visits brief. Conversations quiet. Movements become purposeful. Few linger near the lighthouse for long. Even experienced visitors admit that the island feels different at night. Less forgiving, more demanding of attention. By morning, Cape Lookout returns to its daytime calm. Sunlight softens the sand, and the waves settle into a familiar rhythm. The lighthouse stands steady and reassuring once more. The figures are gone. The panic feels distant, almost unreal. Yet those who experienced it remember clearly. The sight of pale shapes near the light. The sudden roar of the sea. The rush of fear that urged escape. Cape Lookout Barrier Island remains remote and exposed, shaped by forces beyond human control. It does not hide its nature or offer comfort after dark. It stands open to wind and water, carrying echoes of past journeys and unfinished moments. When night falls and the lighthouse glows against the dark, the island seems to awaken in its own way. Figures may appear briefly in the shadows. Waves may surge louder than they should. And those who stand too close may feel the sudden need to leave, driven by an instinct that cannot be explained, only obeyed. Here, the land and sea speak together, reminding visitors that some places are not meant to be lingered in after sunset, only witnessed from a respectful distance before retreating back into the safety of the light. Thank you for walking the haunted barrier islands of North Carolina with me tonight. These islands are beautiful, fragile, and filled with memory. They have witnessed storms, loss, and countless lives claimed by the sea. Sand shifts. Water moves on. But spirits linger where stories were never finished. If you ever find yourself standing on a quiet barrier island after dark, listen closely. The ocean may be speaking, and the island may be listening. Would you dare spend the night on one of these haunted islands, surrounded by darkness and waves, or would you leave before the tide erased your footprints? Rest well, my friend. Until our next haunted journey.